Welcome to Betrayal Stories. My name is Carmen, and today I want to tell you about the night that changed the way I see love, loyalty, and forgiveness. It wasn't the kind of night you plan or even expect. It was the kind that sneaks up quietly, catching you off guard, forcing you to face the truth about yourself and the people you thought you knew. For years, I believed that love alone could hold a marriage together. I thought that if you gave your whole heart, stayed patient, and forgave the little hurts, things would eventually get better. But love without attention becomes a lonely echo. And that's exactly what my marriage had turned into. Logan, my husband, was a good man in many ways. Responsible, hardworking, respected. But he had built invisible walls around himself. Walls that I could never climb no matter how much I tried. We had once shared everything. Dreams, laughter, silly conversations that went on past midnight. But somewhere along the way, those moments stopped. The man who used to ask how my day went had started coming home too tired to even look at me. I told myself it was normal, that all marriages go through phases, that his silence didn't mean the end of love. But deep inside, I felt something fading, like a candle slowly losing its light. I tried to reignite it. Romantic dinners, weekend plans, even long letters I never had the courage to give him. But nothing reached him. Then there was Gary, Logan's son from his first marriage. Gary and I had always kept a polite distance. When I married Logan, Gary was already in college, polite but distant, cautious about me, and I didn't blame him. I wasn't his mother, and I never tried to be. Still, over the years, we found a quiet understanding. He would visit occasionally, bring flowers, ask about my work, and leave before the silence grew awkward. One morning, I got a call from my father saying he wasn't feeling well. He lived several hours away, and Logan was buried in work. I didn't want to drive alone, and when Gary offered to take me, I was grateful. It was supposed to be a simple trip, a few hours on the road, a quick visit, and back home before sunset. Nothing more. The drive started peacefully enough. The sun poured through the windshield and the radio hummed softly. For a while, we talked easily. About work, music, small things. Gary told me he'd been thinking of moving to another city. He wanted a fresh start, he said. I could hear something heavy in his voice, like he was carrying pain he didn't know how to share. Halfway there, clouds began to gather. The light dimmed, and soon rain started to fall in heavy sheets. The wipers fought to keep up, but the storm grew worse. Then came the sound, a hard thump, a sputter, and the car began to slow. Gary managed to pull over to the side of the empty road. The engine refused to start again. We sat there, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. Our phones showed no signal. The nearest town was miles away. Eventually, Gary spotted the faint glow of a small roadside motel. We grabbed our bags and ran through the downpour, soaked by the time we reached the door. Inside, the old man at the counter told us they had only one room left. There was nowhere else to go. No taxi service, no nearby shelter. I hesitated for a second, then nodded. It wasn't a choice. It was necessity. The room was simple, clean, and quiet except for the rain tapping against the window. I changed into dry clothes while Gary called a local mechanic. No one could come until morning. We were stuck there for the night. For a while, we just sat apart, each lost in thought. The TV murmured softly, but I wasn't really watching. I found myself thinking about Logan. Whether he'd even notice I was gone, whether he'd call to check on me. My phone was still dead, so I didn't know. The silence felt heavier than the storm outside. Then Gary spoke. "You look tired," he said gently. "You've looked tired for a while." His words surprised me. No one had said that to me in a long time, not even Logan. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice cracked. "Marriage can do that," I said. "It takes a lot out of you." Gary looked at me quietly, his eyes filled with something like understanding. He doesn't see it, does he? That simple question broke something open inside me. The walls I'd kept up for years began to tremble. I told him how things had changed, how Logan had become a stranger, how the love I once felt had turned into loneliness. He listened without judgment, without interruption. Just silence and presence, and somehow that felt more comforting than any words could. For the first time in years, someone really heard me. When I finished speaking, I expected him to offer advice or empty reassurance, but he didn't. He just said, "You deserve to be seen." Those words echoed through me. They weren't romantic. They were kind. But kindness, when you've been starving for it, feels dangerous. I felt tears forming, and before I knew it, I was crying, quietly, uncontrollably. He handed me a tissue and said softly, "It's okay. You don't have to hold it all in." Something shifted in the air. It wasn't attraction. It was recognition, the feeling of two lonely souls acknowledging each other's pain. The room felt smaller, the silence louder. We talked for hours after that, about life, about the choices that define us, about the people we lose along the way. By the time the clock struck midnight, the rain had eased, but neither of us moved toward sleep. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, my heart heavy with thoughts I didn't know how to name. I realized then that the real betrayal in my life wasn't about another person. It was about me, betraying myself, my own needs, my own voice, my belief that love meant enduring loneliness. Sometime after midnight, I whispered, "Do you ever wonder what makes people stay when they're unhappy?" Gary thought for a moment and said, "Because leaving feels like failure." His words hit me hard. I turned to look at him, but sometimes staying is the real failure. He nodded slowly. Maybe, but sometimes people just need someone to remind them that they still matter. We stayed up until dawn, not touching, not crossing any line, just talking. Really talking. When the first light crept through the curtains, I felt something inside me calm for the first time in years. It wasn't love. It wasn't desire. It was peace, the kind that comes from finally speaking the truth. The mechanic arrived around 8. By 9, the car was fixed. We packed our things in silence. Before we left, Gary turned to me and said, "You don't have to keep pretending you're okay." I wanted to thank him, to tell him that what he gave me that night wasn't confusion. It was clarity. But the words wouldn't come. The drive back was quiet, but not awkward. There was an understanding between us that didn't need to be spoken. When we reached home, Logan was in the driveway, phone in hand, ready to scold me for not answering. But the anger in his eyes faded when he saw my face. "Everything all right?" he asked, voice uncertain. "Yes," I said. "Everything's fine now." That night, after Gary left, I sat alone in the living room and thought about everything that had happened. I realized I didn't need grand gestures or apologies. I needed honesty, with him, with myself. Over the next few weeks, I started talking to Logan again, not about chores or schedules, but about us. At first, he didn't know how to respond. He was awkward, defensive, but slowly something softened. Maybe he sensed the change in me, the quiet determination that I wasn't going to fade anymore. We went to counseling. We had long conversations filled with both tears and silence. It wasn't easy, but it was real. I told him how invisible I had felt, and for the first time, he listened. Truly listened. Gary moved to another city soon after. Before he left, he sent me a short message. "Thank you for talking that night. It helped me more than you know." I stared at that text for a long time. It reminded me that sometimes the people who enter our lives unexpectedly don't stay to change it forever. They stay just long enough to show us the direction we were meant to go. Months later, Logan and I weren't perfect, but we were honest. I learned to stop waiting for him to fix things and started speaking up for myself. And little by little, the distance between us began to shrink. Sometimes, late at night, I think back to that stormy evening, the sound of rain, the small motel room, the quiet conversation that saved more than one heart that night. It wasn't a scandal. It was salvation. I share this story not to justify mistakes, but to remind anyone listening. Betrayal doesn't always come from another person. Sometimes, it comes from abandoning yourself. If you've ever stayed silent just to keep peace, if you've ever convinced yourself that loneliness is normal, I hope my story makes you pause and ask, what would it take for you to feel seen again? Because the truth is, you deserve that. You deserve to be heard, understood, and loved without conditions. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever experienced something similar, Share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe your story will help someone else realize they're not alone. And remember, sometimes the hardest truth to face is the one inside your own heart.